So, welcome everyone to the MyData webinar. Today we are exploring the topic of health data. The purpose of these webinars is to share relevant know-how, practical use cases, and theoretical input on how we are making human-centric personal data happen. My name is Ansku Tuomainen, and I'm the communications lead for MyData Global. I will moderate today's webinar. We are very happy to have today Erwan and Medy from Groupe-Vyv presenting their work on healthcare issues and how it tackles data challenges such as self-data and trust. Erwan is in the Data and Digital Strategy Department, supporting the digital transformation of the organization. Groupe-Vyv is the largest social protection group in France, handling health insurances, healthcare, and health services. Also telemedicine and social housing. Erwan's key areas include new business models and platformization of data science assets, including artificial intelligence, self-data, data governance, and digital education. After Erwan's presentation, we give the stage to Paul Knowles from the Human Colossus Foundation, aka Dativa, who is also a steward for the MyData Health thematic group. He will be exploring practical models for health data interoperability. Paul is the innovation lead behind several key decentralized global data economy initiatives. His recent work on overlays and the blinding identity taxonomy facilitates safe data sharing with peer-to-peer technology. Paul's reputation as an innovator and data expert has been established through a career in pharma biometrics. But before heading into today's exciting presentations, I'd like to start with a few words about MyData, especially for those who are attending or listening for the first time. So, what is MyData? MyData is an idea and an alternative vision for ethical use of personal data. It's also a movement and a community, and a global organization. The core idea of MyData is that people like you and I should have an easy way to see where the data about us goes, specify who can use it, and change these decisions over time. We believe that for this to become a reality in the world, we need to push for three big shifts. We need to move from formal to actionable rights. We need to move from data protection to data empowerment, and from closed to open ecosystems. These three shifts, complemented with the 6 MyData principles, are further explained in the MyData Declaration that you can find in our website, and you can sign it also. The MyData movement and community is facilitated by the MyData Global organization, whose main purpose is to empower individuals with personal data. And we are doing this together with the different stakeholders from business, legal, technical, and societal sectors that make up the MyData community. We want to see value created for people and at the same time value created for organizations, so everyone wins. As I mentioned earlier, these webinars are the space and time where to share and learn about the work happening in the human-centric personal data sphere. Just a few words about the practicalities. The flow of the webinar is such. First, both Erwan and Paul will take approximately 15 to 20 minutes for their presentations. We can take a few questions after each talk and follow up with a short discussion round in the end to speak a bit more generally about the topic. Okay, so I will then pass the ball to Erwan, who will also share his screen for the slides.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity you gave me to explain what is a Vyv group. I'm sorry, I'm French, so my English is not so perfect, but I will try to do my best. My name is Erwan. As it has been said, I work at the digital strategy of the Vyv group, and I will explain you what is the Vyv group, why is the Vyv group, and how we are tackling data issues regarding health. So basically, we are an health insurance company, but we are more than just supplemental health. I don't know if you are aware of the French health system, but there is the mandatory health insurance, and there are several supplemental health companies that provide other reimbursement for some other health expenses. So I will give you some key figures. So we are 10 billion companies of revenue, and we are protecting 11 million people. We have some clients, but we also have some patients. I will give you a little bit more detail here after. We have nearly 100,000 companies that are our customers. And we also are managing some health institutions, and we are 45,000 companies. Our key activities, as I said, is health insurance. You can see at the top of the screen, there are more than 50 health insurance companies, but there are some big ones such as MGEN and Harmony, but there are some very small health insurance companies who have decided to gather themselves. Then we have some health services. We are managing some clinics, some medical retirement homes, some ambulances, etc. We tackle people from their first screen to the last breath, because we also have some burying companies. And we have also some telemedicine companies, and Senioradom is a company that helps all people to stay at home. So as you can see, we have a lot of activities. We are a group made of more than 100 companies, and this is what is the Vyv Group. Now, why such companies have decided to gather themselves and to build a new approach to health? Because beyond just health insurance, we are trying to build a true customer, a true patient pathway. We want to rethink and redesign our offer from health insurance and to provide health services, healthcare services, and also social housing services. So we are trying to platform our ecosystem from health insurance to a true patient and customer pathway. And this is possible only if we know our customer, if we know our patients, and if we are able to be at the, there are a lot of companies that are trying to become data centric. As we are a French company, we are subject to the GDPR, but we are trying to go beyond the GDPR regulation. As an insurance company, we want to become customer centric based on data from our customer and our patients. And usually there are a lot of data science use cases that are the logical pathway to become a companies from insurance product to health services. So we use our data, our customer data from better customer relationship. We use them to design product. We use them to manage some event when they have to be reimbursed, and to build some prevention program that are health services and a program with healthcare professionals. But what I want to discuss to you, especially in this webinar, is if we want to go beyond, if we want to build a true new governance based on trust with our patients and our clients, we have to not just follow the GDPR, but we have to go beyond. This is why we are doing some initiatives to provide critical thinking regarding digital issues to our patients and to our customers. And the other example I want to discuss with you is the self-data experimentations that we are doing. So how to provide critical thinking through dialogue with our clients and our patients. So they agree to share their data, so they know what kind of business we are doing with them. We have a program that is named Better Living in Digital Ages, and it aims to enable critical thinking regarding digital issues through dialogue, and that allows empowerment of our clients and patients regarding their data. I will give you two examples of some things that are done under the Better Living in Digital Ages program. First, we have it can be seen as a little silly, but we have made an event that is named "Let's Talk About Death." So we are putting forward a dialogue with our patients and customers, so we can discuss with them subjects such as what are the digital footprints we leave behind us when coming to digital issues. Which footprints do we leave behind us when we live, when we die? How do we want to be remembered? So we are really trying to allow dialogue with these people, so they know what is at stage. So this event has been made with many tracks and conference with a healthcare professional, with people from digital. We had people from Facebook to discuss with them what becomes a page when we are dead, and it has been a real success, because this kind of questions are really not known to patients and to people. And when we ask a question, okay, what is your existence through Facebook, through Twitter, and when you will leave, how do you want to be remembered, and what do you want to be done with your digital footprints? So this is the first example at how we are trying to speak with our clients about such issues as data and health data. Another example I would like to propose is we have created an escape game that is named Data Heroes, and that enable dialogue between kids and their parents, but also the education professional through gamification and augmented reality. The main goal is to put the kids at the center of a scenario where he has to tackle issues such as cyber fake news, data theft, identity management, etc. And that is a true successful initiative, because it has been made with the French, with the CNIL, who is handling the GDPR at the French level. And such escape game has been proposed in several major events, and we are also working with the French Education Ministry. So once again, the key point to be remembered is that how we try to discuss of data issues with people that are at the core of our ecosystem. You can see some pictures of the escape game. So there are some kids who are the data heroes, and they are fighting red hat or black hat. No, it's not red hat, it's black hat. And after they discuss their data footprint with their parents and with their education professional. Okay, that was the first key point, dialogue with core people. Now to finish, I will give you some example of self-data experimentation we have made, because beyond dialogue, obviously it's important, but we are also trying to build with our patients and clients some true experimentation regarding self-data, by giving back their information to our clients and our patients. And this is trying to build some prevention program. I have some example to propose regarding this experimentation. There is MyData, My Health, with one of our insurance company. We have gathered a sample of clients who have accepted to think with us how to use their liquidation data. Liquidation data for us is the reimbursement data, because as a health insurance company, we know how many times you have been to your healthcare professional, which kind of drugs you have been reimbursed. And so we have gathered, I think, 30 or 40 people, and we have giving them back the full historic of their data. And the key point was to with them, okay, now you have your data back. What do you want to do with them? How do you think it could be used? And so we have made several workshops to think of services that could derive from such data. And this is really interesting because, well, I can explain later if we have some time, but not all the people, for example, do not want their data, because some have been very sick and they just want to forgive that they have been through cancer or something like that. But it was a really interesting experimentation. It's written in French, but it's a scenario of okay, the guy is named Mathieu, and he can use its data to better track his health, something like that. And last example is how we have done some self-data experimentation regarding data portability. The first example was to retrieve your blood analysis data, and when you have your data back, you can grant access to health prevention program. And the second example was that you trying to build new clinical researches protocol. So with the blood data analysis, we have tried to cross them with the air quality that have been accessed through API. Here you can see an example of a girl who has access its blood data back and has granted access. She has uploaded its data to our prevention program that is named Vivoptim, and the key goal is to provide more information to the healthcare professional. The other picture is that you can see how we have across health data based on blood. I do not know, it's a triglycerides or something like that, and with a cross referring with air quality. It is important to note that actually these experience are more from a technical perspective. We are far from creating any value from it. This is a pure idea that we want to build and to be real by accessing the portability rights. And the business model are still to be explored. So that was the key the key issues I wanted to arise. Okay, just remember that our position is to speak and to explain what are the digital ages issues with our patients and our clients, and how we are trying with them to build new services. And I thank you.
Thank you, Erwan. So now I would like to give space for the participants and their questions. And I have here one question that came to the chat box. I heard you said in the end that business model is to be explored, but some point there came a question. What is the commercial motivation to educate people in it? Yeah, to educate these people in these questions and the commercial motivations to train kids as data heroes. Yeah, it was sort of answered, but maybe you can still elaborate a bit.
Yep, it's totally free. We are not doing any business with that. It's not only free, but the whole material is under Creative Commons license. So we are trying to enabling people to use it a lot. It's not a commercial perspective. It's to build a new relationship with our clients and customer. It's mandatory before doing any business.
We have another question in the chat box, and it says, there's a question, would you consider yourself as a data operator in the sense of MyData? If yes or no, why is that?
I do not remember the MyData operator definition.
We will have actually, we're currently building or creating a MyData operator white paper.
And I think that's maybe it was Isabel here, and that's the question. I think it may be interesting to actually clarify that when is an organization and data a MyData operator or not? What are the criteria for that? It may be linked to the work being done with the MyData operator subgroup, but I think it would be interesting to start to clarify that, because otherwise people may say we are a MyData operator even though they are not. Because I think it's a very strong label. So thank you for your honesty, Erwan. And I have a few other questions. Like, which data are you managing today? Is mostly claims, or is it also medical data? If it's medical data, or complete, and how much do your patient really accept to share private data with you?
Actually, health data can be considered under several kind of definition. For example, when it's coming to the blood analysis, it's a pure health data. But when we are for the insurance business, when we know that someone has been to healthcare professional, it's health data that is mandatory for us to have if we want to be able to do our business, to reimburse them. So it's I would say health data by not by itself, but we know that he has see the healthcare professional. And but for the blood analysis issue, it was just a test. It was me and my colleague who have retrieved their blood analysis. But later we want to link it with the patient health files, because as I said, we have 1,000 health institutions who have access to patients file their disease, their drugs at a very fine level. But we, of course, we have to follow the right to or not to use it. So it's still very fragmented what we can do right now.
Thank you. I have a question, but I think other people have a question first too.
I have a question from the Netherlands, Chantaco. Are you interested mostly in companies accepting their workforce to gather self-data? It might be more fruitful than individuals for you, isn't it?
Yes, of course. We are not selling any data.
No, but I can imagine that prevention is important for companies. Like here in the Netherlands, we are working on this, and I can elaborate on the idea that you can, for your company, it might be interesting to have all kinds of workforces accepting to gather their data, environmental or individual.
Yep. A key point I would like to say right now is that prevention programs is an activity that is absolutely not linked to the insurance business. In France, it is absolutely forbidden to use health data.
That's different in our country. I worked several years in a health insurance company also as a doctor. And nowadays, our government is very much urging health insurance companies to not only to look at care and cure, but also to prevention.
Yep,
it's not easy, not that easy for them.
Yes, but I'm not allowed to say if that's good or not good. But the fact is, we use health data to build prevention program and to provide service, but absolutely not to build adapted prices regarding insurance products.
Yeah, because you have secondary prevention and primary prevention that makes also a difference in practice.
Yeah,
but I understand your position. I understand.
Thank
okay,
you.
Thanks.
I have a question or a couple of questions.
Okay.
And sorry for jumping out of the chat. Do you want me to do the chat or?
Yes, we have. If we can take maybe one question now, and then I can take those questions, and then we have time reserved at the end of the webinar after Paul's presentation. For more questions.
You can give to people my email address so they can reach me through email. Of course.
Yes.
Thank you.
But you can, Aslak, you can write the questions to the chat box, and I will take them there, and then we can continue after I will make sure that we get the questions then after Paul's presentation.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So, Paul, I would like to give you the floor or the stage.
Hi everyone. So yeah, my name's Paul Knowles. I am one of the co-founders of the MyData Health thematic group. My background has been in data curation and also in statistical analysis of clinical trial data for 25 years. So I've always been very close to data. I enjoy it, but it's also been a bane trying to kind of curate some of this stuff. So I will show you a couple of inventions in this webinar to show you some of the things we've built to tackle some of the issues that we've come across with merging clinical trial data in the past. I run an innovation hub for a company called Dativa. And that innovation hub is actually spinning out into a new foundation in Geneva called the Human Colossus Foundation. So as a co-founder of that foundation, it's a technological home for collaborative projects for the betterment of humanity and the planet. But our main vision is really to facilitate a new paradigm in web interaction, where innovative human-centric business models can be tested and developed by leveraging user-centric services, data aggregation, self-sovereign identity, and distributed trust frameworks. And during this webinar, I'll show you what we believe is a real groundbreaking invention in data capture called the overlays capture architecture. And that's really triggered this whole build for the foundation, because it's quite important for the next version of the web. Cool, so that's enough about me. I will crack on. So yes, so this is what I was mentioning, the overlays capture architecture. It's a globalized, standardized global solution for data capture, which can facilitate a unified data language. So as most of you know, most of the vocabularies and languages out there are dependent on predefined attributes and also ontology mapping. The benefit of the overlays capture architecture is it is literally an architecture. It's not a language. We're not saying to people how they should define their attributes, any of that stuff. They can define it as they like. But we work on a dominant design model. So the most popular schema, they end up becoming the de facto standard, if you like. So hopefully you all know what a schema is, but I put it here as a machine readable definition of the semantics of a data structure. And an overlay is, sorry, a schema base is just a stable base object. So the way I define a schema base is really, if you think about a schema, you'll know that within the schema, there's labels and character set encoding and formats and predefined entries, all that sort of stuff is kind of burnt into the schema, or a lot of it's burnt into the schema. So we've separated all of the tasks that a schema does and put it into its own separate data object. And the schema base is really the ground zero for a schema. So the only thing we define in a schema base is a little bit of metadata, the attribute names, and then the attribute types. I will also show you a flagging mechanism in the schema base for flagging any information that could unblind the identity of a governed entity. And then, okay, so an overlay is just are these extra data objects that are linked to the schema base. So it's all task-orientated layers. You'd have the character set encoding is one layer, formats are another layer, labels are another layer, etc. So before I kind of go into each of these objects individually, I wanted to give you an example of some of the things that I've come across when trying to merge data from sister studies within the clinical trial domain. Is very simple things can break the merge when you're trying to merge, even if they're, the design of the study is very similar. You could have a demographics schema, and it could take, literally, it could be different variable lengths that mean that when you merge the data together, some of those variables truncate. So that kind of got me thinking, well, why are silly things like, variable lengths and labels and stuff getting in the way of all these merging things? And that's really how we came across this architecture. So I'll start with the schema base, and I've got here, there's some attribute flagging in the schema base, which I'll come on to. I've kind of explained what a schema base is, and then all of these are overlays. So the masking overlay is used to add data masks to schema that has already been flagged in the schema base. There's a source overlay. If you have something like dynamic data, you can use a source overlay to point to an endpoint, and that pulls it into the field. Okay, so then there's a character. So this is character set encoding. So this is a really interesting layer. So character set encoding is traditionally burnt into the schema, and the problem with that is, if you have a character set encoding that is not UTF-8, when you basically you have to rebuild the whole schema to make it work for data harmonization and merging purposes. But because we have it on a separate layer, it means that literally anybody using any character set in across the globe can still use the same schema base, and all they have to do is put in their own character set encoding overlay, and then they can use the schema base. Okay, so then entries for predefined entries predefined field values to the attributes. Then there's labels and category labels, formats. So if you had date time formats, all that sort of stuff, you put that into a different overlay. A mapping overlay is if on most systems, they usually have some sort of numeric code for some of their attributes, and you can use a mapping overlay to directly map to internal systems. And then there's an information overlay, which is basically for giving the user some guidance on what to enter in each of those fields. So that's kind of what the stack looks like at the moment. Oh, I missed one, subset overlay. So yeah, if you only want to have a few attributes from a schema base, you can use a subset overlay to define that subset. Okay, so that's basically the structure, what it looks like. There's some optional ones, there's some core ones. So all of those that I described, they're all to do with, for the issuer's perspective, people that are issuing schema. There's one overlay type that we've left for the data subject, and that's a sensitive overlay. I know that Eric's on this call. I'll give you a good example of why the sensitive overlay is useful. So if you look at gender, for instance, male, female is not particularly sensitive information. It's certainly not defined as PII. But if you're from Thailand, you know the government recognizes, I think it's, Eric will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 18 different gender types. So obviously that subset can become quite sensitive. So in the case, if you're a Thai resident, you might want to take your gender and flag that as sensitive. So you could literally put a sensitive overlay on a data vault, and anytime that's flagged, anytime that someone's requesting gender from you, it could automatically be flagged as sensitive. Okay, I'll quickly go into that. I mentioned a flagging mechanism in the schema base. So when GDPR initially came out, I very quickly spotted that it looked good from a legal perspective, but from a tech implementation perspective, it was found wanting, because what we really want is we want to know, you know, as the issuer is building the schema, you really want to be flagging it at ground zero, which of those elements are dangerous attributes for collecting. So by dangerous, I mean, could they potentially unblind the identity of a governed entity? So I took this to the identity community, and everybody agreed that it was a good thing to build a blinding identity taxonomy. Loads of people contributed to this, from people from Google to all of the identity experts to Amazon, and we come up with a blinding identity taxonomy, which looks like this. So this is 49 elements that could potentially unblind the identity of an organization, an individual, or a thing. Although if it's a thing, it needs to be a governed thing. So this now resides with the information sharing group at Kantara Initiative. They now are in charge of looking after this taxonomy. I'm still the primary target, I suppose, for if people come across elements that should be on the list. But this now gives tech people something to really go by, something that they can look at as they're collecting data. They can quickly look against this and see if the data should be flagged. Okay, so why is OCA useful? So I won't read through this whole slide, but the basic elements that make it useful are really for data decentralization and data harmonization. And to give you an example of why that is, so I'm currently working as a consultant with Roche, And when Roche talk about data harmonization, they talk about data harmonization across functions within their organization. And they have a data capture hub to do all of that, and it works very well. But the problem they have is what if they want to take the data beyond the confines of the company? And that's where OCA becomes really useful, because in my case, all of the pharma companies, they can use the same schema bases, concomitant medication or adverse events or demographics, all of those schema bases, they can all use the same schema base, and nothing gets in the way, whether they want to use a different character set encoding, or they want to use different labels, or they want to add some more predefined entries to some of the attributes. Nothing is stopping them from using the schema base. So it really drives data harmonization. And so rather than having to reissue an entire schema, say Roche issues a schema, and Novartis doesn't have to reissue a schema. They can literally just issue, say, an entry overlay for predefined entries, and then they can still use that whole structure. So obviously, because you're harmonizing data in this way, it becomes very, very powerful for data pooling. The schema bases can remain much more stable, because you don't have to keep reissuing schema for similar use cases. You can flag attributes that need to be either encrypted or removed. So that flagging mechanism is built into the schema base. I'll show you how that looks in a minute. Obviously, data decentralization. So because once you pull all of these data objects into the open source community, the idea is that anybody can pick up those objects and use them as they need to, or as their use case defines. And then the last one, and this is interesting, is internationalization. And for me as a tech guy, the thing I love about this architecture is that it drives a unified data language. But when I speak to business people, they don't really care about that too much. What they really care about is language. And so because the entry overlay and things like the information overlay are separate layers, it means that regardless of what language you need to show to the user, you can just put in different overlays specific for that language. And then when you go and to decentralize it and pool the data, if you want to do that, then it doesn't matter what language they're using. So at the moment we're working with Novartis on 4 projects, and the thing that's really getting us over the line is this internationalization. Okay, so I'm going to quickly show you how you flag attributes in the schema base. So as I said, it's all to do with the blinding identity taxonomy. That's your primary reference for flagging. So this is an example of a demographics form, and on this form you'll see that date of birth here is a personally identifiable information. That's the element in the blinding identity taxonomy is dates and timestamps, e.g. date of birth, etc. So we want to flag that. So in the schema base, this is what a schema base looks like. You can see date of birth is there. And then down here we have this flagging object, right? So you can immediately flag that as sensitive right from the start. So this is the very first point of defining anything is a schema base, and we've already flagged it, right? So this means that once data is captured through this mechanism, once the data goes through the life cycle, whoever is the data controller can encrypt it or remove it as they need. Okay, so that's the blinding identity schema object. As I said, there's a bit of metadata up the top here. So a description, etc. And I'm not going to go through all the overlays because I haven't got that much time, but I will show you an entry overlay just so you can kind of see how this links. So as you can see, these are all the predefined entries for all of the attributes. And in the metadata for the overlay, you've got here that you reference the schema base with a hash link. And the hash link is basically just there's a description there, but that's basically your linking mechanism, how you would link this overlay to the schema base. Okay, and here, as I say, this is an English language, that these entries are in English language, so you put that into the metadata. Okay, so I'm going to quickly look at what this looks like within an industry sector. So say Roche has built a demographic schema. If you look at this, if you were to compress all of these overlays and the schema base together, that is kind of what a traditional schema might look like. So we've obviously separated all these tasks into different objects. So in here we can kind of, okay, in the metadata of the schema base, there's an option for classification. So that's got a GICS code on it. So that can kind of show you which industry has issued this schema. So I won't read that, but you can see for yourself. And then, so all it takes, so then Novartis might want to come in, right? And they want to add a few more predefined entries in. They can just pull out Roche's entry overlay and stick in their own one. Same thing here. Pfizer might want to add some new labels, so they can pull that out and put their own labels into it. And then GSK might just want to use a few attributes from that schema base, so they can just pull in their own subset overlay. So through all this process, the schema base has never changed, right? And all of these companies, now you can see it looks fairly rich. A lot of companies are contributing to harmonizing the data, right? So that's why it's powerful. I know I haven't got much time, but I want to just quickly show you what this, where we're going with this. So as I said, OCA kind of facilitates a unified data language. If it was to be used globally, it would go that way. Basically, these schema bases end up being like vacuum, like Hoovers, right? Okay, so the Mickey Mouse model is a global server model to kickstart a safe and secure data sharing economy. This is why we call it the Mickey Mouse model. And I will quickly show you kind of some of the data flow into this. Where to start? So basically, in Mickey Mouse's, as you look at it, their left ear, this is really where I call the private data. So if you were to do a clinical trial, you know, Novartis would want to have a relationship with the subject. They would go through all the consent processes, and then the subject would, or probably through a clinician, would start entering data into the clinical report forms for the clinical trial. But what we can do with that is once they've captured that data, we can go through some sort of consent, another consent with the subject saying, you know, do you want to share this data? If they agree to that, what you can do is you can put it into OCA transformation. And the reason we do that is because OCA basically allows, when it's in the big wide world and in the open source community, if it's not in OCA format, it comes across all the same issues that I mentioned before with, you know, data pooling and all that kind of stuff, right? So the idea here is that, okay, so they've accepted that that you're happy to share the data. You could put in a semantic container and push it into a fairly anonymous consortium space called, in this case, the Innovative Medicines Initiative. And then what you could do, because the data is in beautifully harmonized format, what you could do is you could do a criteria. So Wellbeing Cart in this case could do a criteria search on the schema bases that are captured, that are resident in that data lake. And if any of that criteria is met, you could hold it in an escrow locker, which is kind of number 9 there on the diagram. And then you can go through this notification and decision process with the subject. Say, you know, so-and-so is looking for a certain type of data. They've done a criteria search. Your data has matched. Would you be interested in being included in this research or not? Yes, no. If they say no, it just removes them from the escrow locker. If they say yes, it keeps them in there. And then it gets pushed into a semantic container. But before it gets pushed onto Wellbeing Cart's side, you would go through this whole credential exchange and consent exchange for data capture. So and once Wellbeing Cart has that data, then it kind of becomes cyclical. So they would move kind of to the other side of the model again, and then at that stage, so it's quite a cyclical model. This is just an example of a similar thing with a food retail industry in Finland. So it's exactly the same. And then this last one was, if you wanted to use data from a couple of different data lakes, this kind of just shows the whole flow of that. And again, I won't go into this in too much detail. It's very similar to what I just described, except you're using it's multi-sector. So in this case, it's food retail and wearables data. Cool. That's all I had for you at the moment. Regarding, I see a couple of questions in the Zoom chat, which I'll happily go through. Ansku, did you want to curate the questions?
I think you can go through them. If you see them there, it's okay.
Okay, I'll start from the bottom and go up. Isabel, is OCA focusing on bit or on all data? It's all data. And it doesn't matter what type of data or what vocabularies are being used, ontologies. It doesn't matter. OCA is an architecture, not a language. Obviously, we're very interested in the bit, and the reason that we're interested in the blinding identity taxonomy is that when we go, if the data gets pushed out of a private space, then obviously you would automatically want to encrypt anything that has already been flagged. So that's why we flag it right at the start. What we don't do is, it's almost impossible to deal with correlation attacks between 2 or 3 different schema. That's probably something that we'll look into further down the line. So, but in the first instance, all we can do is take the attributes that are in one particular schema and say, okay, in this context, these attributes are sensitive. How does OCA fit with HL7 Fire? So yeah, again, we're not a language. So if Fire wanted to use the OCA architecture, they could easily do that. They would define all of their attributes in Fire standards, and the only difference is obviously we're a layered architecture. So it just allows different entities to interact with that structure, which obviously they can't do at the moment. Identity, how do you authenticate identity? Okay, so what I didn't mention during this slide deck, you may have noticed right at the beginning that I'm the chair of the Hyperledger Indie Semantics work group. So I'm very close with the SSI community, and in fact, some of this modeling has been built with some of the expertise of the identity people. How do we authenticate identities? So yeah, as I said, I didn't show it on this slide. I've actually got a more detailed slide which kind of goes into the SSI onboarding stage, which is kind of all the know your customer sort of thing. Because all of this modeling at the moment is quite conceptual. I should say the Mickey Mouse model is totally conceptual at the moment. We haven't built anything on this, but we will. One of the first tasks we'll do in the Human Colossus Foundation is try and set up some sort of pilot to show how it works. But OCA is a live implementation. So the overlays capture architecture, the very first use of it is with Novartis. We're working on a third-party risk management project with them, and we're using OCA, and that works really nicely. We're really happy with how that's going.
Okay. Yes, I had a question because I have been working for 10 years for the pharmaceutical industry. So I was wondering if there would be an application for the new immunotherapies because of their need to share anatomopathology images.
So yeah, there's obviously nothing stopping any of these companies from using this architecture.
Yeah.
It's I guess the one of the tools that we will be building is a transformation tool, and we have to build that because obviously OCA is great. If you want to build stuff from scratch, you can just build straight with the architecture. But for any data that is in kind of legacy format or anything like that, or has been is very reliant on ontologies and stuff like that, we're gonna build a transformation tool to do that. one thing I should say, just to kind of get a visual picture for everyone here, is that when you traditionally think of a schema, think of a spreadsheet, right? Every attribute is usually a horizontal line on a spreadsheet, right? With the overlay, with the OCA, we're kind of more interested in the columns, right? So if you had 20 attributes, 20 lines on a spreadsheet that are for a schema spec, we'd be more interested in the columns. So obviously all your formats would be in one column, all of your labels would be in another column. So each of those columns would be a separate overlay that you would link to the schema base. I know I didn't exactly answer your question, but I hope that there's been enough information for you to.
That's okay. I understand it can be done for everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of information to take in here.
Perfect, thank you.
There was also a question about monetization of data here, that would the companies pay patients for their data? And I think this is a bigger question also.
So just to give you kind of an idea of a use case, so looking at the Mickey Mouse model, if you actually, let me just quickly share the screen again, just so I can have that up. Let's have a look here. So on this screen, so if you look at Mickey Mouse's right ear as you're looking at the screen, a good use case in clinical trials would be, say you're a company is looking to start a new clinical trial, and they want to go on a patient recruitment drive. What they could do is they could potentially do a criteria search on data that everybody has contributed to into a data lake. They could do a criteria search on that according to whatever they're looking for within subjects, and then once they go through the process and there's some sort of linkage between the subject and that pharma company, then they would obviously pay the subjects for entering the trial. So yeah, there's ways of paying the subject. And I guess it's also depending on what the subject wants. So sometimes the subject might want to donate their data to something. Other times, it makes more sense for them to be reimbursed for their data. So I guess it's dependent on different use cases.
Thank you. I would like to tie this also to the MyData principles. And since the first principle is human-centric control of personal data, and basically making sure that the individual and people understand their rights and possibilities. So maybe I would phrase this question, that how do we make sure that it is easy for the individual to have access and to give and deny and revoke their consents?
Yeah. So in answer to your question, there's some flow in here that is not shown. But one thing I did want to say, I'm going to come back to your question in 1 second, but what I did want to say is within these semantic containers, they would have gone through some sort of OCA transformation, and the data will be actually a lot easier and a lot better format for sharing for third-party application use. So there are some flow lines in a more detailed slide where they can actually request to extract data straight from the semantic containers into a vault that's under their control. And then they can, as people come and request data, they've got beautifully harmonized data that they can reuse. Regarding the consent piece that you mentioned, they've obviously they're going through all of the consent flow at each stage. So every time a semantic container is before it gets moved, there's always a reconsent back to the subject. And so, and they can, as I say, they can extract the data at any point in the life cycle. We'll always leave that option open for them to extract the data. It's regarding revoking data. You can revoke consent. That's not such a problem. Within the self-sovereign identity community, they have revocation registries to do that. But on a practical level, I know that, you know, obviously once, in my case, if you're to start a clinical trial with Novartis, you know, it's going to be impossible to revoke the data at that stage. Once you've consented to go into the trial, then, you know, you don't want to mess up Novartis's processes too much. So there'll probably be some legal pros within the privacy policy or whatever they put it into, to say that they can't revoke their data. But again, it's dependent on use case. But obviously, throughout this whole flow, the subject is totally in control of data capture and data sharing, because it's always going back to the subject. They always have to consent whether they want to do that or not.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we are facing the end of the webinar, but I would still like to give the possibility for the participants to voice out their questions still. If you have any, I know like few questions were still left for Erwan, but I would also remind you that we have the MyData Slack, where we have the health group, where you can also continue these interesting discussions. Maybe Isabel, you have something?
Yeah, well, I just one last question maybe for Paul, is there anything already in production with OCA, please?
Yep. So not probably not in the not openly available, but we're working very closely with Novartis on a third-party risk management project. The partners of that project are Swisscom and Bayer and West Pharma. I think Pfizer are coming on board as well. And that's the first implementation of OCA. This is still kind of very, very new, but we've already got another 3 projects with Novartis beyond this, off the strength of what we've demonstrated in the first pilot. So we'll see how we go. You know, it'll take a while for it to for people to globally adopt it, but I think once they see the power of it, then it should hopefully fly. But we'll see. But all of this stuff, Isabel, is totally open source. You know, in the Human Colossus Foundation, we'll be building work groups to help build out these things and to deal with use cases and maybe problems we haven't seen. So it's going to be very much a community effort as we build these things out.
Oh, thank you all, and thank you both Paul and Erwan for the presentations. And my apologies that there are maybe a few questions still left there, but I definitely encourage everyone to join the Slack and keep on talking about this important topic. It will for sure spark some interesting discussions there, and looking forward to see where all this goes. So we're facing the end of the webinar, and I want to thank everyone again and remind you that you can also support the MyData movement by becoming an official member. You will be in the fine company of Paul and Erwan and Groupe-Vyv and the Human Colossus Foundation, among almost 100 other organizations. So go to mydata.org/join. And thanks again, and I wish you a great day, and let's stay in touch.